Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the English Language Arts Gallery. Today, we're going to continue with our English for Academic Purposes course, and we're going to talk about the point-by-point approach to comparative essay writing. So, if you're a teacher and you're interested in teaching this lesson in your class, you can find the link to this lesson in my TpT store in the description of the video. And if you're interested in seeing more videos like this, please remember to subscribe to my channel. So let's go ahead and let's get started talking about the point-by-point comparative essay.
Okay, so let's get started talking about our point-by-point comparative essay. So we're going to begin by talking about a topic that everybody loves, and that's food. So I want you to take a moment. I want you to think about your favorite food. So I look at all of these things here, and gosh, I love pancakes. I love pizza. I pretty much love everything that's pictured here. So I want you to think about your favorite food and maybe think about some other different types of food that you really enjoy. So what are some ways that foods can be different? Well, they can taste different. Some are healthy, some are less healthy. We've got food from different food groups. The texture is different. The composition of some foods can be different. We eat some foods like pancakes as breakfast foods, and pizza we might eat for lunch or for dinner. The cost of certain foods can be different. Some foods are processed, some are more natural, and we prepare our foods differently. Okay, so these are all different ways that the foods that we love can be different. When we talk about two things that we're comparing, we're talking about the topics for comparison. So, for example, if you were to compare the food from Korea and the food from Japan, those would be topics for comparison. Similarly, if you wanted to focus on two dishes that you're going to compare, say you wanted to compare sushi and kimbap, then those would be the topics for comparison. The way we compare things, that's the points of comparison. So I asked you, how can foods be different? We talked about the taste, the texture, the nutritional content. All of those things are points of comparisons. They're ways that we can compare different types of food. So if we're comparing the food from Japan and the food from Korea, and we compared it based on composition, cost, and nutritional value, those three things represent the points of comparison. So we've already talked about the block method. I want to just take a minute to review this. Okay. The block method is a little bit different than other types of essays that we've talked about because the block comparative method has 4 paragraphs. We've got our introductory paragraph. Then we've got our first paragraph where we discuss similarities between the two topics of comparison. And then we discuss differences between the two topics of comparison. And then finally, in our 4th paragraph, we have a conclusion. We don't have to compare these two topics from topics of comparison across points of comparison. So when we're doing our block method, we only list the similarities in the first paragraph and the differences in the second body paragraph. So the point-by-point method compares the two topics for comparison across those 3 points of comparison. And each point of comparison will get its own body paragraph. So let's take a look at what that paragraph structure looks like here. So we've got our introduction. In our introduction, what we want to do is we want to hook the reader. We want to introduce the topics for comparison, the 3 points of comparison, and something called the significance of comparison. What do you think the significance of comparison might be? The significance of comparison is who's going to care about the comparison that you're making? Why is it significant or why is it important? So if you're comparing food from Korea and Japan, then it might be significant for someone who's traveling to the northern part of Asia and wants to become familiar with those two types of food. And finally, you've got a thesis statement. Your thesis statement is going to depend on exactly what the essay question is. You might be asked, are they more similar? Are they more different? And you're going to craft your thesis statement based on that. Your first body paragraph, you're going to discuss the first point of comparison, and you're going to talk about both topics. And the second point of comparison gets its own body paragraph, as does the third. In the conclusion, you're going to signpost, you're going to restate your thesis, the topics of comparison, the points of comparison, and the significance of comparison. And as always, you want to leave your reader with a strong concluding thought. So let's take a look at what that looks like here. Okay, so take a moment and look at this essay, and I want you to tell me, what are the topics of comparison? So let's read through our introduction and see if we can find out. The options for learning that are available to students today are almost limitless. We're living in a world that's increasingly dominated by technology, but more traditional learning options are also available. Where textbooks are concerned, students may choose to switch to ebooks on tablets, or they may continue to use printed textbooks. Teachers should consider the similarities and differences between these two choices before choosing how their students will learn. Where convenience, cost, and learning outcomes are concerned, there are striking differences between the ebook on tablets and printed books. So I can tell right away that my two topics for comparison, or the two things that I'm going to be comparing, are ebooks on tablets and printed textbooks. Right there. Those are my two topics for comparison. What are the points of comparison? Well, the points of comparison are convenience, cost, and learning outcomes. Okay, those are the three things that I'm going to be comparing these two topics on. And what's my thesis statement? Well, my thesis statement is the last sentence of my introductory paragraph, and it tells me that there are striking differences between ebooks on tablets and printed textbooks. So my body paragraphs, the rest of my essay, really needs to focus on the differences, because my thesis is saying that there are striking differences between these two topics for comparison. So based on this thesis statement, what do you think the essay question may have been? Well, when I see that there are striking differences between ebooks and tablets, I think the essay question was related to, are they similar? Are they different, right? It's not asking me to simply list the comparisons and the contrasts. It's asking me, are they more similar? Are they more different? Okay, so I need to make a determination there. Okay, so does the author support his thesis statement? Yeah, I think the author really does do a great job supporting his thesis statement. And we're going to take a look at how the author supports his thesis. Okay, so we've already gone through our introduction. One thing that I do want to touch on here is the significance of comparison. So the significance of comparison is right here. Teachers should consider the similarities and differences before choosing how their students will learn. So if you were writing an essay comparing ebooks on tablets and printed textbooks, it's reasonable or logical to assume that teachers would want to read this essay. They would care about the similarities and differences. In addition to teachers, we could also mention students or even parents, because they would also be involved in the learning process. So let's take a look at our body paragraphs here. I want to start with topic sentences for each body paragraph. The first one tells us ebooks on tablets are more convenient for students than traditional printed textbooks. So remember, my first point of comparison was convenience. My second here says tablets are more expensive than printed textbooks. My second point of comparison was cost. So I can see my topic sentence relates to that second point of comparison. And finally, there are stark differences between students' learning outcomes with tablets as opposed to printed textbooks. My third point of comparison was learning outcomes. So I've hit on all of those points of comparison in each topic sentence. Now I'm going to go through each paragraph, and I'm going to look for comparative language that supports the author's thesis statement. And I see right away, the author says whereas, which is signaling a contrast. Whereas textbooks can be burdensome to carry home every day, tablets are lightweight and easy to carry. Instead of carrying multiple books for every subject, students are also able to download hundreds of books onto one small device. So I've got instead. And then let's look at this last sentence here. I'm going to choose a different color. In addition to convenience, there are cost differences between tablets and printed textbooks. I wonder what that last sentence is, because the author's not talking about similarities and differences in terms of convenience. What the author is using this sentence to do is to transition to the next point of comparison. So that last sentence there helps to link those two paragraphs. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at our next body paragraph. The initial cost for using tablets to access ebooks can be quite high. Schools must purchase the hardware, software, acquire Wi-Fi access, and train school personnel. However, the costs will be lower after the initial startup costs, as ebooks are considerably cheaper than printed materials. Ebooks often allow students to update to the latest version instead of purchasing an entirely new textbook. In the same way that textbooks need to be replaced when newer versions come out, tablets also need to be replaced every few years. This leads to more spending by schools. When considering costs, teachers and parents should also examine learning outcomes for students who choose to switch to tablets. So again, if I go to that last sentence, I can see the author is using this sentence to transition to the next point of comparison. So here the author has used words like cheaper, which is a comparative adjective, used words like however to signal a difference, and he also used comparative language. He said in the same way. Okay, he's talking about a similarity there. So I think the author does highlight a significant difference that tablets are more expensive, but the author doesn't really draw a very stark contrast in that paragraph. In the next paragraph, the author does really draw a stark contrast between these two topics. Here he says, studies have shown that students who learn on tablets learn faster and achieve higher standardized test scores than students who use printed materials. Tablets also help to make students technologically savvy, whereas textbooks do not. However, tablets offer some distractions that printed textbooks do not, such as access to video games and web searches. Teachers and parents can help control what programs are downloaded and accessible on the tablets. So here we can see the author doesn't use a transition sentence in that last paragraph. And the reason for that is because there's not another point of comparison. The author has only addressed 3 points of comparison. So let's move on to our concluding paragraph. Of course, the author signposts or signals the end of his essay, and he restates the topics for comparison: tablets, and textbooks, right? And he restates the thesis. They could not be more different. Here he talks about convenience, cost, and learning outcomes. Those are my points of comparison. So all of that is restated in the conclusion. Here he mentions teachers, administrators, parents, and students. Those are all people who are concerned about these two topics of comparison. So that's our significance of comparison. And finally, the author leaves us with a strong concluding thought. So I think that's an excellent conclusion. So now that we've gone through an example, let's go ahead and practice language for comparing and contrasting. China blank Korea in the Confucian aspects of its culture. China is similar to Korea. Korea blank from China in that it no longer uses the Chinese alphabet. Korea differs from China. Blank Korea. China does not have close military ties to the US. In contrast to Korea, blank Mexico, Venezuela is a Spanish-speaking country. Just like Mexico, Venezuela is a Spanish-speaking country. Okay, so I want you to practice creating sentences for comparison or contrast. So you can pause the video and you can work through these pairs of sentences. And I want you to create one sentence, or if you're going to use two sentences, to add comparative language to create a comparison or a contrast. I'm going to do the first one as an example. An essay has a clear structure with an introduction, body, and conclusion. A presentation has a clear structure with an introduction, body, and conclusion. I can change this to say, just like an essay, a presentation has a clear structure with an introduction, body, and conclusion. So go ahead and pause your video and complete those other 4 pairs of sentences. Okay, let's go over our answers here. A presentation uses semi-formal language. An essay uses formal language. I would say, while a presentation uses semi-formal language, an essay uses formal language. A presentation uses transition phrases. An essay uses transition phrases. I can say, both a presentation and an essay use transition phrases. A presentation uses text and visuals. An essay uses only text. I might say, while a presentation uses text and visuals, an essay uses only text. A presentation concludes with a Q&A section. An essay concludes with a reference section. I can make this into 2 sentences just by adding some language for contrast. A presentation concludes with a Q&A section. On the other hand, an essay concludes with a reference section. Okay, so now I want you to practice brainstorming a point-by-point comparative essay. So you can begin by using a Venn diagram. I want you to think about 2 topics, and I want you to brainstorm as many similarities or differences as you can. Let's look at an example first. Here I'm talking about summer and winter, okay? And I've listed as many ideas as I can as to things they have in common or similarities, and things that are special about summer and special about winter. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to circle things that I think I want to talk about in my essay. So if I was talking about storms, it's hot, there are typhoons, it's cold, there's snow, there's blizzards, there's extreme temperatures. What do all of these things have in common? weather. They're all related to weather. So one of my points of comparison would be weather. Let's take a look at what other points of comparison I chose. I also chose holidays and sports. So possible topic sentences, and this would depend on what my thesis is, could be summer and winter both offer extreme weather. Winter offers more frequent holidays. The sports in summer and winter are quite different. Okay, so I want you to start your own comparative essay. I want you to brainstorm things that you might like to talk about. And I want to start with holidays in your country. Think about popular holidays that you celebrate. Now, I want you to choose two holidays. I want you to think about how they're similar, and then I want you to think about things that are special about each one, how they're different. So you might talk about the length of the celebration, the foods that you eat, whether you give or receive special gifts, where these take place or where they're celebrated. Are they religious holidays or are they secular? And based on the Venn diagram, I want you to identify 3 points of comparison, just like I did in my example with summer and winter. And remember, each point will be one body paragraph. You can use this to help you, this template or this outline, okay? And remember, your introduction should hook the reader, list the topics, points, and significance of comparison, and have a strong thesis statement. Okay, think about how you're going to get the audience's attention. Think about what your topics, significance, and points of comparison are, and what you're arguing in your thesis. Then when you move to your body paragraph, you want to remember to talk about the first point of comparison. Are you focusing on similarities or differences? And do the same with the second and third points of comparison. Finally, as you move to your conclusion, remember to signpost in conclusion, restate and summarize your topics, points, and significance of comparison, and think of a strong concluding thought. Okay, so after you've done all of that, you're ready to use this template to draft your comparative essay. After you draft your comparative essay, you can work together with a partner, or you can use this worksheet to check and make sure that you've included all the features of a point-by-point comparative essay. All right, great job. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like, subscribe, and comment on it. And I will be producing more videos on English for academic purposes and academic writing. I'll see you soon.